everybody, you with your main man, Anthony Brogdon, once again, my friends. I'm rocking and rolling with, hey, check it out. I'm with a guy who I really admire. He's a strong brother that walks around the cities of Detroit and whatnot, which is where y'all know where I'm at. Did I say my name? I'm Anthony Brogdon. I'm super excited this brother come on the channel because I've been watching him. You know how you see a guy and you say, dang, that's a deep dude there. That's how I think about this man. I said, that's a deep dude there. And then he be writing books and all that other stuff. And I was like, man, he heavy. And how about this, everybody? I don't really say too much about it, but he and I in the same frat. And check it out. Y'all know what frat it is, because Dr. Martin Luther King and Thurgood Marshalls and all them kind of cats are my frat brothers. So I ain't got to say no more on that one. Y'all know who I'm talking about. So before I get to him, and I asked him, had he seen the video? He watched the video that I did with the guy out of Quindaro. Y'all need to watch that one, where his ancestors walked across the Missouri River to get their freedom. And then when my man got there, he started a business and was successful back in the 1800s. Y'all need to watch that one. Did you watch the one? And I'm still on an emotional high on this one that I did with this guy who found out that his grandfather was in the KKK and he killed the guy. He wrote a book on it and he come on the channel. Y'all need to watch that one. I'm gonna stay on that same note. Did you watch the one where the two of them, the two ladies, they're the great, I don't know how many greats, granddaughter of a black guy who was enslaved. My man was so tight that when he got his freedom, he started a car manufacturing company in 1905 and that kind of thing. Did you watch that? Check that video out. Did you watch the one that I did with the lady? She's a professor out of Clinton, Arkansas. She says she's dedicating her time and her research on the Clinton Massacre, very devastating massacre that they instilled against them black people because they wanted to learn how to vote, and they wanted to vote, and they killed. Some of them were just standing in the field sharecropping, and they shot them dead. Oh man, we jamming. Did you? We are international on this channel. Did you see the one I did with the guy out of London, England, who it talks about Black history in Jamaica and how the British people took the slaves from Africa and Jamaica, and then some of them went from Jamaica and went back to Africa? How about this? Did you see the one I got on the video of the lady who's the college professor who, check this out, this right here deep. Now, I don't know how we keep doing this. This one here deep. Her great, you know, how many greats. He was enslaved, he escaped, and then he found out that he could fight for the British against America to beat them in the war, and then the British was gonna help him out, right? Well, the British lost the war, so they said, well, we'll keep your promise that you can get on this boat. We kept getting on them boats. You can get on this boat and sail to Canada, and they discovered Nova Scotia.
Well, that whole idea,
said, and I had the stories wrong, but I'm still giving it to you. The one who said her grandfather was enslaved, and when he got his freedom, he heard how he could get on a boat and go back to Africa, and he ended up in Liberia. And then he left Liberia and went to Sierra Leone, where this lady was. I'm telling you, my friends, we jamming on this channel. The train has left the station. And watch this, the guy that's coming on today, he got some stories to tell you. We hit the subscribe button, it's free. I don't ask no information. I just want to know, let me tell you, really, all the subscribe does is let me know you like me. I like you, and I'm gonna keep giving this stuff, enlightening your mind. Hit me back, please. That's all I'm asking you to do. Like this video, my man, he nodding, he gonna tell you some stuff. I need you to like it, or you gonna like it anyway. Just hit the button, hit the notifications bell. I'm putting 4 or 5 videos up a week. You wanna be notified when they come up. That's what that does. and then tell somebody about strong inspirations. Do that for me, my friends. I want 1,000 of y'all to come to this festival that I'm doing. I got my own festival in the town that I told you about earlier. It's called Quindaro, Kansas. It's Memorial Day weekend. I'm gonna feed you. I'm gonna give you some beverages. I can't give you no liquor. That ain't, I can't do that. But I'm gonna feed you at the fish fry on Friday. We're gonna take tours of the city on Saturday. Then we're gonna have a picnic after the tour. And I'm gonna do all the picnic food, the hot dogs and the hamburgers and the chicken and the ribs. They known for ribs down there. And I'm gonna give you all that, and we're gonna watch them stars for a minute. We're gonna hear them voices. And then Sunday, go to church. We're gonna work that out, and then we're gonna have brunch and send you on your way happily and more enlightened. Join me on that. You'll know that I got a movie out, my friends. I'm this serious about this game. It's called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. Slaves who went to college, did you know that? I named the names and the schools and the time that it happened. Did you know slaves owned businesses? I name them. I named the business, how much they were worth. And some of them, I found the guy that would have been worth $20 million today. Back then. It's in the movie. The movie starts and ends with a guy that at the time was 101 years old. And let me tell you something. He told in the movie, y'all can't tell me nothing. I done seen it all. It's in my movie. I took it to 40 cities on my own dime. It's streaming on Amazon. Check it out. One more thing. I want you to read my book, my friends. Black Business Book. Well, got over 200 facts. I'm telling you, I'm so confident you read my book and you don't learn nothing new, I give your money back. A book with a money back guarantee. Boom, shakalaka, there it is. And it's called Black Business Book. You get a copy, I autograph it. It's available. Check all this stuff that I'm telling you is on my website, businessintheblack.net. Now, one more thing before I get my guest on. And I told you how much I admire this gentleman right here. Y'all hear me use that word strong a lot, right? It's my favorite word. I've been using strong for about 20. I wish I lived on Strong Street. I just like strong. And strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. He's a strong brother, man. Come on the channel and tell us your name and let's get it on.
Well, Anthony, thank you for the kind words. And it's a pleasure to be here with you, my brother. My name is Bill Herbert, and Anthony and I are frat brothers. We've been frat brothers for a long time.
Yes, sir.
I'm an admirer of the family because I know his dad is another great frat brother in the same frat. And my father was a brother in the same frat. So this is a historical thing. We're passing it down. Yeah, I've got other of the young men in the family also coming along. But anyway, we won't get off into
Now let me ask you a couple questions. I got to get on you personally for my guest, man. Well, where you from?
I was born in Harlem, New York City, between 116th Street between 7th and Lenox. If you put a pin in the center of Harlem, New York, that's where I was born.
Yeah, Harlem That's the height of it. And yes. So, did you hear Black history stories? And I mean, Harlem was the hit. How was it growing up in Harlem?
There was a lot of history there, and I was surrounded by it because my father had quite an interesting history, and he was an immigrant from the West Indies, came here in the early 1900s. And then on my mother's side, they had some history as a slave background. So I had to kind of mix. I'm the product of the US slave history side and the West Indian side. And so I heard the history on both sides as I was growing up.
But before we get to that part of it, in Harlem, did you see the Apollo and Did you know any of what was going on? And this might be before your time, of what was happening in at the Harlem Y, did you got a good sense of Blackness being there?
Oh yeah. Well, look, Apollo was like my second home. I mean, as a kid, whenever I had some spare change, if I could pull that together, I'd go to the Apollo and see some of these artists going way back, from the earliest time that the Apollo existed. I started going there as by myself without my parents in the 50s.
Okay.
1952, 53. So, I would see some of the Black performers that were popular.
Okay.
And Harlem had been the home of what we call the Harlem Renaissance in the 30s and 40s, where all of the Black artists,
yes,
the Langston Hugheses and the Paul Robesons and all these folk, they came and they had their watering holes, and this was headquarters for them. And so that was the environment that I grew up in.
yes.
And it was quite a stimulating time. I mean, we were, Black folks were scuffling. The Depression had left its mark on Harlem. U.S. had the Depression, and whatever the white U.S. felt, Black U.S. felt it 10 times more. But still, sure. we had a cultural thing going on in Harlem that was quite stimulating.
Now, let me ask you this. Growing up, being in Harlem, did you go in, was Harlem a separate city in itself that you really didn't have to go to downtown New York or Times Square or to the other boroughs? Was there enough in there in Harlem for you to be able to do all you need to do, or did you kind of venture out in those other spots?
Well, like I say, I was born in Harlem, but when I was about 10, my dad, who was a dentist, and he used to practice right in the front room in our apartment, he bought a home in another borough of Queens, South Jamaica, which was another Black community. But it was a little more, we had a little space there. We had some trees growing and some grass. So he bought that house in 1942, and we moved out there during the war. And it was still a Black community, and the segregation was still going strong, in terms of what kind of jobs brothers could find and what areas we could live in. But we had a little space there. We had a yard where me and my brother and sister could play. So the Black folks started expanding out of Harlem, and had been doing it throughout most of the 19th century.
But when you grew up, Harlem was all Black for the most part.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And the place we moved to, South Jamaica, was all Black.
Oh, is that Harlem was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and now Harlem is going through a gentrification.
Oh, sure.
And so all of a sudden, these brownstones that we lived in, these beautiful brownstones that white folks owned, and they had moved out and moved to the suburbs, and now they chopped up these beautiful brownstones into little tenements, and that's where Black folks lived at the time.
Okay.
And so eventually, a few of us were able, and not me or my family, but there were a few Black people that were able to buy their own brownstones, but most of these were owned by the other folk.
I got you.
And
Did you ever visit West Indies?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I've got family over there.
Yeah, right. When you say West Indies, is that the name of the island, or that's just the area?
There's a whole string of islands. The Antilles is the formal name for it, but it includes. My dad was from Trinidad, which is the southernmost island before you hit South America. Then you got Jamaica, Aruba.
I got you.
There's a whole string of islands there, and so times were real tough in the West Indies throughout all the islands after slavery was outlawed, because that's how they used to make their money. Is raising these crops with slave labor. And slavery in most of the islands was outlawed somewhere around the early part of 1800s. Before it was outlawed in the US, it was outlawed in the West Indies.
So
But,
let me go. This gonna lead into what you talk about your genealogy. Was your father's grandfather a slave?
His grandfather, I don't know that far back.
Okay.
My dad was born in 1897, and I don't know about his grandfather.
Okay.
But so he was born in 1897, and slavery was outlawed in Trinidad in 1838.
Yeah. So right.
So by the time he was around, there was no more slaves, and his father was not a slave, but his grandfather might have been a slave who got freed.
Yeah.
But now later on, oil was discovered in Trinidad, so then it became a wealthy island. But before that oil was discovered, Black folks were really scuffling in there, and they were leaving in droves coming to the U.S. to find work. That's how my father got here. He couldn't find any work there. So in about 1915, he started as a merchant seaman, traveling on these merchant boats. And then one day, he jumped ship and found his way into Harlem. And that's how he got started. He was what they call an illegal immigrant.
Yeah, okay. Let me ask you this. Do you know of any Black history stories out of the West Indies of some sort?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's that. Well, in my first book.
There you go. Show the book. Yeah, there you go.
A Place Near the Front. Now, this is a book of this dude here.
Right.
That's my dad.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. He got his citizenship by joining the army and fighting in the First World War. And that's how he became a U.S. citizen. He fought with an all-Black unit in France. He came here, found his way. Somehow this brother pulled himself up by his own bootstraps. He didn't have but pocket change, and he ended up down at Howard University. And when he finished Howard in 1917, he joined the U.S. Army. Either joined or he was going to get drafted. He was a young second lieutenant, went over with this all-Black outfit and fought in France. But that's how he got his citizenship.
You showed me the picture of your father. He looks light complected.
Actually,
is there white in your family?
No, he's pretty brown skinned.
Okay.
It's funny the way that works out. I remember your guest from the video I watched talking about how you got all sorts of shades and colors and flavors. Now this brother, he came from Trinidad. He was brown skinned. This just makes him look lighter than he is. My mother, her family was slave history. She's very light skinned. But what that just shows you is the slave masters come into the slave.
They would take that. They couldn't keep their hand off them women, man.
Oh, for sure, because that's the way my mother's side got light skinned, and so I came out somewhere in the middle here.
Yeah, right. I got you. I hope some people. I had one lady. I thought she got a little tipsy about the question, but she understood where I was coming from, and it got to the answer. So now he gets here. He goes to Howard. And he graduates from Howard. Now, on your mom's side, what's the story there?
Well, that was kind of interesting. That's going to be my next book.
Okay.
Is I've been doing a lot of digging into that history, and I know going back to my great grandfather, he had an interesting story. He was a free Black man. His dad was free Black. And I think—
Well, let me stop you there. Where was this, do you know?
This was in Ohio.
Okay.
Around the Columbus area.
Right.
And then the family had originally come from Virginia.
Okay.
I think I've got it traced all the way back to the late 1600s, but I haven't got it locked for sure. But it's around the 1619 is my great grandfather, one of his ancestors, arrived also from the West Indies, and he was a free man. So Uh, I know for sure, going back to my great-grandfather, he was born, my great-great-grandfather, he was born in 1800 in Virginia, and then moved to Ohio. And his son, my great-grandfather, ended up a Union soldier, and he served with a unit called the 7th Independent Cavalry from Ohio. Now, this was an interesting situation because that was a white unit. They didn't allow any Black people in these white Union Army, but my great-grandfather was a barber. He was a skilled barber, and Abraham Lincoln was the president at the time. This unit, 7th Independent Cavalry from Ohio, was assigned to guard Lincoln.
Oh, I love it.
And Lincoln needed a barber. My great-grandfather was a young barber, so they said, well, who let this colored man into this unit and let him be a presidential guard if he'll cut the president's hair, which he did. So that's how he got into this unit. This unit, usually you couldn't get in if you were Black unless you were a cook or a cleaner. And but he had these barbering skills, so they said, okay, we'll put you in here. And then he was a presidential guard. And this was all during the Civil War. And he, cutting Lincoln's hair, he got to know him pretty well. Lincoln told him, he says, listen, man, Solomon, that was his name. Listen, Solomon, when this war is over, how would you like to come to Washington and work in the federal government? Solomon said, sure. He said, what kind of work? He said, well, you don't have to be a cleaner. We need some Black people working in the office. How would you like to do some office work? Solomon accepted that, and the story goes that he was the first Black man to become an office worker in the federal government of the U.S.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah, and so that's the subject of my next book. He lived one hell of a life, this guy. Solomon James Johnson is his name.
And so he cut Lincoln's hair. You don't know, and I would suspect not. He didn't see no combat though.
Well, the presidential guard, they were assigned full-time to guard Lincoln. So when Lincoln went to the front,
Lincoln did go to a front, they say.
Yeah, Lincoln would visit. He would visit his generals. And he would go to the combat areas from time to time. When he went, his guards went too. And so Solomon, my great-grandfather, went along with him. So he had two jobs. He was a Union guard, soldier, and guarding the president, but then he was also, he had to cut his hair.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And so you haven't been able to chronicle how. Oh, hold on. Now, this is what I'm gonna go back to this. You said something earlier. You said her grandfather, great, however many, was in West East, and he went to West Virginia, which was a slave state.
Well, I know my great-grandfather, his father, who was born around 1790, 1800, he was a free man. But in my research, I also have gone back. I think I've got another link to the family going back to about 1619 when, we first came here.
Yeah.
And I believe that this first guy here, his name, named after you, Anthony Johnson, this guy came from the West Indies and he was a free man. But I haven't locked all this down yet.
Yeah,
I think that's what the situation is. So he was free because there were a few free Black people around, even at the earliest days, coming over from the West Indies and other places like that. And once they got here, they faced some tough times, but they came here in some cases as free people.
I think that's one of the things that, and I said this in my opening, that we didn't understand. Black people did travel around. They got on boats or whatever and did some international travel even during that time.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there was travel going back and forth between the West Indies and the U.S. So you had this big slave trade going on at the time, but you also had some other trade, some other traveling, where you had some people who were not in bondage.
Yeah.
And it was dangerous because once you got here, then they would try to kidnap you.
That's what I was
put you in
thinking.
slavery. Yeah, so it was tough. And then some of the people got over here. You even had, sad as it is to say, you have some free blacks came over here and had slaves themselves. There's some cases of that.
I've heard that story.
Yeah, that's the real deal. It wasn't that many of them, but there were cases of that.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about, so you have some roots in Ohio too.
Yes, yeah. See, so this, my great grandfather, his family started in the Virginia area, but they got out of there and moved up to Ohio. It was in the Columbus area. Going back into the 1800s, Columbus was a real thriving area where free blacks could do pretty well. And so my great grandfather and his family ended up being relatively prosperous. I mean, they owned a little bit of land, they were free. And, back in the late 1800s, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Are there any other stories? Because I know there are other stories that you want. Now, hold on. You've written other books too. Or is that the only book so far?
Well, I wrote this first book about my dad coming over from Trinidad, fighting in the First World War. So that's one story that deals with that whole migration of Black people out of the West Indies, not just Trinidad, but all those islands, because it was so poor and they came to the US. Here they faced discrimination, not only from white folks, but Black folks, because these people came over here and the Black folks who were Native Americans kind of viewed them as competitors for the few little scraps of jobs that we had and didn't like them. And so these brothers and sisters coming from the islands faced a lot of discrimination from Black people right here in the States. That's the real deal.
Yeah, okay, now, but let me go back this. Did most of them come here and go to New York, or?
Well, New York was the most popular place to land because it's so close.
Right.
And then some of them would come as far as Detroit, or farther even. Yeah. But most of, at least in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, they were stuck right in New York there. And so there was a section within Harlem that was mostly West Indian. And so they were kind of discriminated against by the rest of the Harlemites who didn't want these West Indians, rubbing elbows with them. And they didn't like them taking up the jobs because the West Indians tended to be a little bit better educated. They had a little better schooling.
Oh, so really?
So they'd come over here and there would be a little bit of imbalance in more skill with reading and writing and so forth. And so that created some tension.
Now, that leads to this question. They were maybe that way because they got a little bit more education because it was going through the generations a little longer over in the West Indies.
Yeah, the slavery had been abolished 30, 40 years earlier. And so, Black folks had gotten a head start on a little training. So that was my first book. My second book, which I just finished a while ago, is about Haiti. And I wrote about the period where Baby Doc Duvalier, the dictator, he was Black, but he ruled like a dictator down there. His government failed. And so I write about these freedom fighters, these street protesters who were protesting, they wanted Duvalier gone and they wanted reforms to take place where the average Haitian could do better. And they were thinking back to the days when Haiti was formed as a slave rebellion that, with such a heroic, glorious start like that, you would think this is going to be one heck of a place. And after the slave revolt, things went downhill Haiti, and they've been downhill ever since.
Now,
So,
I recognize the name. Did you pick that because it's close to the West Indies? Is Haiti close to the West Indies?
well, yeah, it is. It is.
Oh,
80's right there. So,
in your research, what are some of the stories you found of how they tried to overthrow him, or did he start out as a good guy and the power just got to his head? Any of that kind of thing?
The Haitian history, Black history goes back to 1798, 99, and Haiti at that time was a slave country in which the French were the slave masters, and Black Haitians, who were formerly from Africa, were the slaves.
I got
and a guy by the name of Toussaint Louverture,
I recognize that name.
He organized a slave revolt and overthrew the French slave masters, and that's how modern Haiti was born. So with that promising beginning, you would think, well, great things are going to happen, but they did not happen. The U.S. kind of got involved a little bit and occupied Haiti, and they just never got the nation off the ground. And so for all these years, they've been struggling in natural disasters, earthquakes and famines, and even today, Haiti just suffered a devastating earthquake. So Haiti's been under the gun. Now, why did I write this story? Because I'm interested in Black history, and my youngest, one of my young grandchildren is part Haitian. And so I wanted to write a little something that would be relevant to her history. And so that's what got me to write this.
How do you do the research for a book like that?
Well, first of all, I read a lot. I mean, I read everything I can. And if you read a lot, particularly of Black authors, going back, you can learn a lot of history that way. We started writing. We had Black political commentators back in the late 1700s in the U.S. We had a Black publication that used to talk about the Black issues. So,
well, hold on, let me stop you. You own something. What was that? Do you know the name of that? What's that called?
Yeah, that Freedom's. I should have that on the tip of my tongue. Yeah. Freedom's Journal, I believe, is the name of it, and they started publishing in the late 1700s. I'll send you a link to that.
Yeah.
And so, in other words, it's a body of written words out there. If we take the trouble, we can find it. So I read all that stuff. You learn a lot that way. And then the oral history of our families. So we take that oral history, and then a lot of times you can find a link between that oral history and this written history. Now, in this case of this book here, a lot of the facts in here came from oral history that my dad provided, but also I started researching public databases, about military stuff, since there's a lot of military history in here, and there's a lot of stuff in there about presidential decrees and how they created these segregated units, how the Black soldiers couldn't do certain things. And I mean, you can read these laws. It's not just something that we've been told. You can read all these laws, segregation within the Army.
Yeah.
So now this story I was telling you about my great grandfather being a barber, how I kind of got onto him is there was a brother who he just passed a few years ago, a guy by the name of Paul Sluby. He was a genealogist, and so that was what he did. He looked at census records and dug into the database. He kind of tied things in. And he somehow stumbled across the fact that my great grandfather, he had heard about this guy who was Lincoln's barber. And, the oral history was this Sluby guy. He lived in Washington, D.C., and that's where the president So he had heard the stories about this black dude who used to cut Abraham Lincoln's hair. And so he kind of dug into the census records and found that it was Solomon James Johnson. Now, he didn't know me or anything. He just wrote a little paper on this. And a researcher at Howard saw his paper and created a permanent exhibit about my great-grandfather in the Howard Library.
Okay.
And so that's how things, sometimes you get lucky. One person gets interested, he writes something, another person gets
interested. For sure.
So there's this permanent exhibit down there in the Spingarn Library at Howard. I went down there a few years ago, spent a day reading all this stuff. They gave me a treasure trove of papers, letters written by Lincoln to my great-grandfather.
Oh, really?
And you know, so if you dig and dig and dig and read, there's a lot of stuff out
there. At the end of the day, hold on, does people, have they, that's a movie or something like that, I'm thinking, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that could be.
Might be right there. You might be right. And this guy, he only lived 42 years. He had what they call consumption. That's tuberculosis. Now they get rid of tuberculosis like that. But he only lived 42 years. He had this TB, and but he accomplished a hell of a lot. And yeah, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people that don't want to hear this. That's what they're criticizing, this critical race theory.
That's right.
They don't want to hear this.
That's right.
They don't want to hear the story that the great contributions that our people have made, and the fact that we've invested in this country as much as anybody else. So we're fighting some headwinds there sometimes.
Yeah, as we sort of kind of come to a close, there are other stories that you and I, you know, we talked offline, that you know of, that you've run across, maybe not in your family or something like that, that you know, isn't there another one or two stories that you said, I just, you know, will blow people's mind that you've come to know?
That I follow a lot. One of my personal heroes is Paul Robeson, who is another one of our frat brothers.
Yeah, that's right. Know. That's right, everybody.
And there's a story too, that we all should know more about, because they tried to tear him down, call him a communist. And you know, there was a time, Anthony, in the early 1900s when the communists that were here in the US had better attitudes and treated Black people more humanely than our own government did. The Communist Party, back in the early 1900s, before Stalin came in and it became a dictatorship, back then, the communists were advocating for the ending of lynching. And for,
you talking about the communists that had infiltrated America, or over there in Germany?
It wasn't even about infiltrating back then. See, it was just another party. The communists weren't enemies until around the 50s. And then all of a sudden, yeah, so in the early 1900s, it was just another party, just like the Green Party.
You know, I didn't know that.
But they were very sympathetic towards the plight of Black people. Paul Robeson was kind of oriented towards that party. And so in 1950, when the communist purges started with this McCarthy era, they ran Paul Robeson ragged, took away his passport, wouldn't allow him to travel. He was an international entertainer, singer, lecturer, scholar, and they had him pretty much on lockdown. And then it was only after he was in that mode for about 15, 20 years, they finally, after that Red Scare was over and that those communist purges ended, then he finally could travel again. But by this time, he's an old man and he was ill. And so that's been a story that I've been following.
Okay.
How they demonized him. And see, in this communist thing back then, it wasn't a crime to be a communist. It was just another movement that at that time, was supportive of the goals of Black people. I'm not advocating communism. Or anything.
Yeah, sure.
But you know, times change, and so that's a story that people need to know more about. Paul Robeson was a great actor.
Yes.
He's got some movies. If you want to see some good old movies, you see Paul Robeson in The Emperor Jones, and he played as an opera written Othello. A play that Shakespeare wrote about a Black man, and no Black man ever played the part of Othello until Paul Robeson did it.
Oh, really?
And he was the celebrated on Broadway, that part he played. So that's a story that's always interested me. Yeah. He's always been inspiration to me as a Black man, as a frat man, just a guy who battled through and ended up getting a little redemption.
Yeah, I love it. Well, hey man, thank you. Okay, now before I go to that, is there a question that you wanted to tell that I have not asked you?
If anybody wants to read my books,
that's what I was
the one
going to
that's
say.
already out. It's available on all online booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and even some few bookstores even have it on the shelf. My new book is coming out within the next couple of months. The name of it is called The Bones of Louverture. That's the book about Haiti. And then as soon as I get done with that, I'm going to finish up this third book about the other life of Abraham Lincoln's barber.
Oh, I love it. Do you have a website or something that people
I do. WilliamGHerbert.com, all one word. All right. WilliamGHerbert.com.
All right. We'll put that in the description. Everybody, I told you my man gonna tell you something that you don't know. I told you, and he told me a little bit about the gentleman and the barber, but I didn't know the story as he's told me today. I'm super excited that he's come on the channel and he's sharing this with you. I'm telling you, I get people from all over. And
hey, my brother, I appreciate.
I just try to come up with some questions.
Appreciate the work you're doing, my man.
Yeah.
Keep it up and stay strong.
There you go. That's what we're gonna do. And so everybody hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on this video, hit the notification bell, tell somebody about strong inspirations. Don't keep it to yourself. Please, everybody, I say this is what we do. The train has left the station and is not coming back. Not until I complete this circle of all this information, and that's going to take years. To you, I say, my brother, with all sincerity, my friend, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing. You telling some stories that other people that you found out that other people might not have shared, and now we know more of some little known stories. That's a beautiful thing. Keep it going. I love that. And everybody, with that, I'll say bye-bye. We out. Peace.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you.